to a lot of friends, like dresses and records and books. And a lot of the time, I never see them again. And in a weird way, I think that works. Because the thing about things is they start to turn evil when you start to forget their form. So if you're not sure what you did with my sweater, I'll just have to love you a little bit more. I had a ring that belonged to my grandfather. He was a mason and gay, and he was distant and bitter. For all of my childhood, we never had much to say. He wasn't the type to give tokens of affection, so I stole the ring when he died. And then 20 years old, when I lost it in a bar, I got the final bottom in my life. The thing about things is that they can start meaning things nobody actually said. And if he couldn't make something mean something for me, I had to make up what it meant. I think it keeps going, and I've borrowed and loaned lots of things. 3 nights ago, in the bar where I lost it, the bartender gave me the ring. And I lay in bed with my phone in my hand, thinking, what can I fix with which app? And I call my grandfather, and he doesn't answer, and I have to make peace with that fact. 'Cause the thing about things is that they can start meaning things nobody actually said. And if you're not allowed to love people
Thank you, Robin, for capturing that and sharing it. And Amanda, for stepping up, being busy on the trail of what you do and stepping into Hudson. I feel like we could probably open it up to people quickly, but I also do want to start with, since this is my first time seeing the film, I often like to just wait to share it with the people who made it, and who are viewing it, and come off of it freshly reflecting. And the themes that I walk away, and I was so excited for Amanda to just dive into one of her gifts of song, was things that exist in a temporary moment right here. Things that exist beyond systems, corporate systems, and things that are of thousands of years. And all that is us, humanity, human beings, prior to the invasion of systems. And I am so grateful to be able to share an evening with you around that theme, both of you, and I feel like every one of you that came here, no matter what it is that you do or where you came from, came for similar reasons. And that's how I'm going to start the conversation. And does everybody here know Amanda Palmer? People are now getting to know Robin McKenna. And for those who don't, I'm going to give a brief description. What I didn't do, actually, I have a piece of paper I'm supposed to read. Excuse me. Welcome to the Basilica Non-Fiction Screening Series. But actually, also, for those of you tuning in to the Hudson train, to the Wave Farm Radio, I am Melissa Oppenheimer, co-founder and director of Basilica Hudson, loving the Hudson train in our solar-powered reclaimed factory. And we are here at Basilica with filmmaker Robin McKenna and musician and author of The Art of Asking, Amanda Palmer, following a free documentary screening of Robin McKenna's gift. Robin made that film when Robin and I grew up together, but then found each other actually since really working here at Basilica and Robin's project and her sort of following the stories of regions and areas. And I'm so happy to know of those 4 worlds that you introduced that I didn't know prior to tonight. And Amanda Palmer, who, if you haven't seen, other than she's a punk rock cabaret superstar, musician extraordinaire, but she had a TED Talk called The Art of Asking that led to a remarkable book called The Art of Asking, which I highly recommend, either audiobook or read, based on her coming of being. And as I got to know her first as human, not knowing her background much, but then through her book, she started as one of those living statues in Harvard Square, those who offer, act frozen, and then you walk up and they give. So I thought of you with the flowers, of course, and discovered the generosity, which I feel like all of tonight is about generosity and spirit of giving. And through that, entered this remarkable story of being, I kind of tried to explain it briefly before the screening to people who didn't know, but that moment when both of us musicians, she was in a corporate reality for a moment, and did this incredible story, and I didn't know her then, but it was like this woman who took off her top. It's basically like, fuck you, corporate empire, will you please drop me so I can be my own person? And then did this incredible thing with Kickstarter and was the record-breaking crowdfunding for music, correct? It was like a...
Unfortunately, still is.
It is still.
Yeah. Which is kind of a tragedy, given that it was in 2012.
2012, so 9 years ago, over $1 million in reclaiming her independence and saying, you know what, there's people out there that like music and actually already come to my shows. What if you and I just do business directly? What if we just skip this whole weird middleman? And then in came this incredible last 9 years, and I would love for you to tell us a little bit about Patreon as we go, is that now she lives completely autonomous from any middleman, and if you ever want to listen, follow it, other than just free here tonight, you can also tune into the virtual, but that Robin, when you were making this film, you asked to get in touch with Amanda. We're getting you in touch tonight. Because Amanda represents so much of what that was. And Robin, maybe tell us a little bit about what started the filmmaking process for you, how you found those 4 stories, and how you found Amanda tonight as a separate topic.
Well, I read this very profound and inspiring book called The Gift by Lewis Hyde about creativity in the artist and creative work as a gift. But the whole first part of the book talks about gift exchange as a way of connecting people and the whole system of reciprocity that comes with that, and the system of relationships that comes from gifting. And then in the second half of the book, you realize that that's all kind of a metaphor for this idea of the creative gift, the inner gifts that we all have. And the idea is that the gift is meant to be passed on and shared and keep moving, not to be hoarded. And that our gifts, it's the same idea. It's this idea that like we have gifts that need to keep moving in the world and be shared. And that was really profound for me. It was like, there was the first part of the book, it was like kind of a radical idea of society of like, wow, like the gift as resistance to like the market paradigm. And I've always been drawn to systems, like when I was younger, I got really into hitchhiking because it was like a way of subverting that thing of like everything you do, you have to pay for it, and we buy and sell things, and that's what life is about. And it's like, wow, there's this thing where people can just help each other do this thing and connect and meet each other and have adventures. And I got addicted to that. I was like, I just want to keep hitchhiking, I just want to keep doing this. And then on the inner level, it's like we have these gifts, and you know, there was something in me that felt like it really wanted to be shared in that way. So this book worked on many levels, and it's not an obvious book to make into a movie. Lewis Hyde told me that when he wrote the book, he used to joke with his publisher. They were like, oh yeah, when someone wants the film rights, like, what are we going to charge? But I love the idea of like taking on a metaphorical level and following characters and their journey and trying to kind of weave the ideas through the characters' stories instead of having talking heads, people talking about the ideas, so that people could really, it would be more experiential and kind of felt, because so much of the gift is about relationship and connection, and so I wanted people to kind of feel what it's like to go inside these places that are so special that operate around the gift.
At what point did you, and I know you have because you've done some events with Contact Hyde about this process you're going into and trying to capture a book in a documentary film like this?
It was pretty early in the process, but the first thing I did was to investigate this idea of the potlatch, which is this indigenous tradition of giving everything away, this kind of feast of giving where people spend years saving up their wealth to give it all away, and kind of gain status and connections to the community through that. So, you know, I live in Canada, and this is a tradition that's very alive on the whole Pacific Northwest coast, and I was like, I don't know, this supposedly happens in my country, but Lewis Hyde talked about it in a much more historical way in the book, so I was curious if this is something that was still very alive and happening. So I found a community, and I went out there and met these people, and I met this young artist and carver who was saving up to give everything away. He was like 30 years old, and I thought that was an amazing thing. So I did a bit of filming with him. I went out there and met him, and it was after that that I wrote to Lewis Hyde and said, I have this idea to remix your book for the 21st century, because his book was written in 1983, so it was before the internet existed. You know, a lot of things have changed in the world since then.
Really?
It's not that long ago, but it was kind of a different world. And he said he would be excited to see that happen, and so he's been kind of like accompanying me through the process. The film took me 5 years to make, and he was kind of supportive and interested through the whole process.
Amanda, did you read The Gift? At what age and time?
I read The Gift because as soon as I started crowdfunding, everybody started giving it to me. And you know, there's some kind of law where you can only be given a book 3 or 4 times before you're obviously, like, ethically, morally obligated to read those copies. So people kept showing up at my shows saying, I can't explain it, you have to read it. I can't explain it, you have to read it, just read it, just read it. And I was like, oh. And then I was as moved by it as you were, and I was so grateful to the book for already having articulated all of this unarticulated feeling that I already had, kind of rattling around. And it was, I looked at it like a Bible. I was like, look, there's fucking proof. People do this. This is real. Like, this isn't just crazy me and my crazy DIY punk friends. Like, this is a whole historic thread of the human experience. It's legit. So
it's coming back right now.
Well, and it's always been around. Like, you talk about you talk about systems and the system, but like, human beings have always had systems. And, you know, the more I do any kind of artwork and community work, and the more in my weird world, as in yours, they just start to become one blur, the more I find myself thinking about, being curious about too, but also just always going back to, like, how did we used to do it? We know that the way we're doing it now is very, very new and very weird and very not working. How did we do it with art? How did we do it with music? What did we do before there was money, before things were commodified, before they were on sale, before you could put a price tag on an offering? How did we do it? Because clearly we did it for many, many thousands of years without the thought systems that we have now. So there's a reason that it resonates. And the biggest question I wanted to ask you was, given the time frame of the making of the film, because you said it took you 5 years to make, and when I asked you at dinner when you finished it, you said about a year ago. That means that the film overlapped the coming into power in America of the greatest non-gift giver we've ever had.
Exactly.
And towards the beginning of the movie, there's a great quote from the Native American artist. He says, "The more you give, the bigger chief you are." And I was like, that just feels like some weird Donald Trump meme waiting to happen. He has got to be one of the most ungenerous, but like ungenerous is a point of pride. And it's such a, like, he's such a perfect shit star on the top of the shit tree of what's wrong with this system. And so how did it feel to be, like, and here you were, like, in the weeds of making this movie and probably just dealing with, like, the technical problems of filming and sound and this, but
the amazing people and relationships you're building with those communities. I want to go to Rome immediately and go be in that factory.
But against that wall, that
she lives in Canada. I mean, it's very different.
True. I mean, you're close enough to smell it. Like, what did it feel like watching that? And also, I mean, not just America, like the tilt of the world towards a worship of a less generous way of being, at least in some departments, right?
Yeah.
What did that do to you while you were making this film?
Yeah, I mean, it was 2013 when I started really, like, I read the book and I started thinking about making this film, and at first I was like, oh, it's this really kind of romantic, abstract idea, this idea of the gift economy. And my brother-in-law worked for the Mozilla Foundation for a long time, and he works on, like, the open internet and working open. And I talked to him really early on about the idea, and he was like, I think the gift economy is really hot right now. I was like, really? And I started looking into, like, the roots of the internet and the gift economy that was in the whole creation of the internet, and hacker culture is a gift economy, and, like, the pirate party in Iceland, and, you know, a lot of people are thinking about these ideas, and even, you know, they say in Silicon Valley, like, the gift is a really big book, and so it was like, you know, the idea of connecting these, like, ancient and new ideas, and I was like, wow, it actually is something that's really in the zeitgeist right now. And then it takes so long to make a film and, like, start raising the money, and, like, you know, you're all excited about the idea, but then years go by, and you start asking yourself, like, is it going to be too late by the time the film is done? Like, maybe this idea will be like an old idea. And then that election happened, and it was like, wow, like, it's like the ultimate huckster salesman is like the leader of the free world.
It's almost, I kept wanting to see the fifth story woven in of like the Trump empire slowly buying up parts of New York City and kicking people out of their homes. Because there's a, you know, even just with, especially in Rome and in Italy and all this, you know, the idea of like who's doing what with what space and who's helping who with what space in what way. And it would have been like the, you know, the perfect parallel story.
Yeah. Well, we did, the first place we showed the film in the US was in San Francisco, with some of the original big culture jammers, and they definitely talked about like San Francisco back in the day and how this kind of thing used to happen. And John Law was like, you know, by the way, we need to be doing more of this, you know? And people are like, but we're not allowed, like it's not legal. It's like, it's changing that frame of mind, you know?
The thing that I found most moving for very personal reasons, what I did for years and years, that exchange, all of those captured exchanges in the museum, but what I kept watching for and kept seeing was, along with like gifting and the delight and all of that, you know, the artistic surprise, there's like baked into it, and I think a necessary conversation anytime you're talking about the gift economy and anytime you're talking about asking, or, you know, especially the gift really given, there's always shame. And my favorite moments, especially because they just felt like they plugged straight into my past and like carved back into that old space, was like, you know, the fear that those opera singers had. You could just see it. They were so scared. And they're clearly so outside of their professional comfort zone, walking around in a museum, doing something that on paper just seems really simple, like, you know, ask a stranger if they want a free song in a museum. Like, how dangerous could that feel? But you can see that, you know, and also I love that you captured the rejection of the song, the rejection of the flower. Because as a street performer, and also as an artist and as a musician, you live in fear of, like, you work on this thing, you have your humble offering, you're so excited about it, and there you are in that very moment, and someone goes, you know, I don't want your freely given bullshit gift, like, you're bothering me, get away. And it is what gets in the way of so much art that could go into the emotional economy, and
so much
that
love,
doesn't.
just so much just relationship.
And I watched, like, as a person who literally gave away, and I am not shitting you, you know, 20,000 flowers to 20,000 strangers all over the world. So many more were rejected, and you know, the more I look back at that, but also just watching your film and going like, oh right, like so much rejection all the time. It works like a galvanizer, you know, and that's, I even saw it in the Burning Man footage. Like, you can't, you know, you can never have a gift without a potential rejection. And yet, that's also what makes the act of giving ever, in any situation, in all of those situations, like, as beautiful as it is, because it's vulnerability. Anytime that hand is outstretched, it can get smacked away.
I feel like it's especially powerful when you see the little kids trying to give the flowers, and there's adults who are like, no, you keep it. Like, no, this is weird. Why am I taking something from you? And the kids are just like, what?
Yeah, the kids have such a different relationship to stuff and what can and can't be exchanged, and who's owed what and how, and what money means.
Money's no good. That's why it's a free screening. So where is your journey with this film, Robin? You started in San Francisco and got all those. I remember you telling me about it because it was part of the organization you presented it with was.
The San Francisco one was just like an independent screening. Right. But we did some screenings with Gather, this kind of like screenings on demand thing, and we've experimented with a lot of different models. Like we work with an organization called Dana in Montreal, which is like pay it forward wellness classes in the spirit of Dana, generosity. So we've done a lot of like big and small screenings and kind of playing with this, like Amanda is such a ninja of like the gift economy and kind of like bringing people together through this kind of alternative way of doing it. And with the film, it's tricky because you have to, you want to show it in a movie theater and that costs money and, there's a lot of economics around it, but we've done a lot of experimenting, but we're releasing it in a kind of like semi-wide theatrical release in the US this fall. There's also a new edition of Lewis Hyde's book, The Gift, that's coming out, and an introduction by Margaret Atwood and a foreword by Lewis Hyde where he talks all about this film, which is a beautiful gift. So we're trying to time it with that and get the film out there.
When is that happening?
September, October.
Margaret Atwood also has a new book coming out in September. It's gonna happen.
Eventually it will be streaming on the
probably by the end of this year.
Yeah. And Amanda, maybe before we open up to questions, part of what, other than that Amanda's my only friend I met on the internet in the entire lifespan of my friend's life. It is, 100%. You are the only real friend I have that Twitter created for me. I do not actually engage in social media, but this is an example of, and this is now a deep friendship of a decade, and it was because we were both trapped in the Icelandic ash cloud, the volcano that happened 9 years ago. I was on tour and I was in Finland, she was in Iceland, and everyone in Europe was grounded. And I played a show, she played a show, I was trapped in Finland, and it was the beginning of worldwide super internet realm, and I've very been analog, hence the Basilica is what it is. I'm not entirely convinced that it is helping much, but at the time I was like, oh, I have to cancel these shows, so I'm going to tell people like we're canceling the next week of shows because we can't get there, no one can anywhere. And these strangers on the internet, which is all that retweet/adding, and I didn't even know how to use it at the time, and there was like this huge slew of people that were like, Amanda Palmer is also stuck in the Ashland, and you should find her. And there was all this like matchmaking happening, and I'm like, who is Amanda, like, why are they connecting us? And we were connected. It's really the only real life moment I've ever had on the internet is there was this woman who started talking to me via Twitter. Hi, I'm Amanda. Oh, people say we're supposed to meet via, this weird little app thing. And then it was, oh, I have a show in London on the 24th. I have a show in London on the 25th. We're trying to get there. We both traveled land, ocean, and walking train 5 days each to get to London and met in London. In the most vulnerable, sweet reality of like our shows, we're back to back. We both had to reschedule our London shows, but somehow, and she showed up like right before I was playing. I was like, well, come to my venue, and no one could leave anyway, so we were trapped in London. There was no hotels, and her friends happened to live, there was no hotels, so nobody was, and she was staying on a single futon around the corner from the venue I was playing. And we, through Twitter, had already figured out that I'll just sleep in the single futon with her, and she'll just come like guest at my show, I'll sleep on the futon, and I'll sing in her show the next night. Never met this lady, ever. And I was in the bathroom doing my makeup, putting like my weird in-ear like thing in my like tuck, and then she's like, talk, it's Amanda. And she comes in and we hug in the bathroom, and I'm like, I'm sleeping over tonight, right? It was the cutest sleepover of my whole life. I mean, it was really one of the greatest born friendships I've ever had,
cute.
Right? And do you remember, Amanda, we don't talk about it all the time, but I like sharing it, when you and I we stayed up till 6 in the morning telling each other at like a tiny little kitchen table our entire lives as best we could, and then lay down like unknown, didn't know if we were either going to get home. Your husband was trying to get to England to get, I was just waiting until British Airways would ever have a flight again. And we were on our little pillow, shared pillow. And do you remember what the last, like, kind of final words were?
No.
It was about talking about, like, love, music, women, journeys, independence. Are we going to be married? Are we gonna, like, and both of us were in love. Neither of us had children. And it was, well, do I have to pick one or the other? Like, am I going to have to pick this over love and child? And the last words were, we're going to have both. And we now live in the Hudson Valley and both have children. That's how I met Amanda. And that, but you've made a million friends like that. I have made one. I've made Amanda Paul, my friend. And then what I want to know is, since that time, so that was 2009, 2010, and since that time, you have created this alternative, there is money exchange, but it is direct to artists. Can you please tell them about this Patreon, like, parallel system where an artist gets to work directly with her,
well, I have a question. Is anyone in the house on my Patreon? Okay, because I posted about this event to my patrons. Patreon was basically the next logical step after Kickstarter, because while Kickstarter is a really good system, and I'm sure I don't need to explain it to you, because you've all heard of it and you probably know how it works. I did a big Kickstarter back in 2012, and basically found myself thinking, God, like, I managed people in one moment in time to put up some money way ahead so that I could make the thing, make the album, send them the album. I don't want to have to do this again and again and again and again. Like, there's got to be a better way of doing this, because I know, especially because I'm very close with my community, that the vast majority of these 25,000 people didn't just want this artifact. They wanted to support the journey, my artwork, my songwriting, my ability to make whatever record they were going to then stick in their CD player or on their turntable. There's got to be a better way of doing this. And about that time, this guy I knew started a company called Patreon, which is effectively just Kickstarter that doesn't end. It's an ongoing subscription to an artist. I've now been using it for 3 years, and by far the easiest way I can describe it is it's basically like an NPR broadcasting system for artists or podcasters or whatever. So it's like a monthly subscription. Some of my patrons here are probably paying, $1, $3, $5 a month, whatever. And that money goes towards anything I want. My office, my rent, my materials, the filmmakers that I work with. And it's an incredibly trusting system. It's an unconditional, we want to hear what you have to broadcast kind of system. And I've been doing it for a very long time, and I still find it scary. I still can't believe that all these people really trust and love me enough to give me their credit cards and their $3 a month or their $10 a month or whatever, but they do, and I actually think it makes me a better artist.
You feel like pressure to be productive?
No, but I feel a lot of pressure to be authentic. I feel a lot of pressure to really try to be a good fucking artist, if you know what I mean. In a way that I didn't. And I always did. I always wanted to be good. I always wanted to make the best kind of most soulful, connected art that I could. But almost like, the refrigerator that you don't hear humming until you unplug it. I didn't realize until I really got started with Patreon and knew that I was going to be pretty much financially set, and that my life wasn't going to be like one giant scary risk after another. I didn't realize the small voice that was always running in the back of my head while I was creating anything, going, you're going to have to find a way to monetize this. You're going to have to find a way to sell this. You're going to have to sell this. You're going to have to pitch this. You're going to have to market this. You're going to have to sell this. And I mean, and this is coming from an artist who writes really non-commercial music. You know, so think about what that feels like, to be an artist who's sitting there and writing your piano songs about abortion and sexual assault and feelings and whatever, and like running back there like a ticker tape is, you're gonna have to find a way to monetize this, you're gonna have to find a way to sell. Like, it's a terrible feeling. You would so much rather be the woman making the mural going like, I'm making this for you. I'm making this because I think you'll love it. I'm making this because I think it might connect with you. It might make you cry. It might move you. It might change something. That's the ticker tape you want running in the back of your head. It's like, what can I give you? What can I make for you? Not, how can I sell this to you? Right? And it's been so transformative, and the last record that I put out felt like the biggest gift I've been able to give back to my community. The most honest record, the one where the ticker tape just wasn't running. Because at no point did I think I'm gonna have to take this up to Steve in marketing and see what he has to say about the album, whether it has a sample. So
those days are gone.
Well, it's still happening in a different way though, and like, you know, worrying. I mean, nowadays it's like, I might make a piece of art, but will it go viral? Will people want to share it on the internet and then somehow pay money for it? Or will it get onto Spotify and rack up 8 million streams so I can buy a fucking sandwich? And I wish I tried to still get this message out, but I also got my ass kicked by my own community for practicing this way. Like, I was so shamed and lambasted by the press for being the shameless, narcissistic, begging, tasteless artist that I really also, like, I took enough of a beating back in 2012 and 13 that I just kind of retreated into my own off-grid Burning Man shack with all of my fans going like, we're just gonna go where you can't bother us. And I hope that changes. I mean, I hope systems like Patreon and the state of mind that people can get into in that museum and at Burning Man and whatever will slowly start to pervade this culture and people will find a different way.
She got her ass kicked.
Got my ass kicked, man.
Any questions? Is this a good time to open it up to any? Yes, can you use a mic? Hold on. Oh, because it is being recording it for both Amanda's podcast as well.
I don't know if it's gonna.
I think about go. Yep, totally coming.
So my first question is, did you guys go to Burning Man? And then my second question is, at the end of the gift, first of all, I just want to make a comment, which is thank you for making this movie, because the gift was a very profound reading for me, and I think you really captured the spirit of it. So thank you. But the second question is, relates to the book, and I'm curious, like, what your thoughts are on this, which is that it kind of leaves off. I mean, the whole book is basically about saying how awesome the gift is and how fucked up the money system is. But it leaves off like maybe there's a way of reconciling the two. And I don't know, I'm curious, like, where in this investigation, do you see that is your conclusion, is there a proper way of reconciling the two, or do you think that we actually need to make a transition to the gift in order to save our asses? Yeah, thank you.
Is that a question for both Robin and Amanda in separate realities? I mean, after your process,
Robin? Yeah, I mean, yes.
Yeah.
No, I think Charles Eisenstein connected us a few years ago, right?
Oh.
He told me
Yes.
he thought of you, and I communicated with you, and
Great.
that was
Yes.
you wrote me that question. You said how much of the book is the book? You already asked
this whole time.
And it's funny because when I started making the film, I was like, well, the book is just a jumping off point, but it's its own thing. And then over the course of 5 years, I really came back to having like art and creativity at the core of the question, and that all the stories were related to that. But it's interesting what you're saying about Louis Hyde's book, because there's been a few different editions of the book, and I think in later editions he's actually said, like, when I first set out to write this book, I was very convinced that one was kind of better than the other, and I've realized that they can kind of coexist and be in dialogue with each other. And I don't know, personally I would just say, like, I'm not too worried about the market economy. I don't think we're going to be vanishing it anytime soon, so I think we're all finding ways to kind of dance with that and navigate it and find ways that we can strengthen the gift economy. And I think Basilica Hudson is a beautiful example of that, and there's many different projects around here in this region that are really like working to make those threads of connection and community stronger, and related to like food and farming and permaculture and all these things that are very inspiring. So, I mean, I don't think that, you know, capitalism is going anywhere anytime too soon. So it's like, how can we, you know, create a conversation and just strengthen the resistance, you know?
But I think, first of all, Chris hosted an amazing panel here about alternative economies, which was fantastic at our Basilica Green Energy Fair this spring. And I learned more about the potential of alternative financial and bartering systems than I had ever, which is why we asked him to put together the great minds in the Northeast working on that, blockchain and a variety of things that I don't know much about, but I learned a lot. And I actually, as a very analog, anti-every system, and started getting a little hopeful that actually regionally we could probably figure out ways to create these systems that, even if we all kind of have these like weird banks that occasionally will eventually get off of, we might be able to sustain locally. So I think there is local, which is hence the commitment to Basilica, is I think that hubs of culture, communication, in small regions could actually create systems between the farmers, the communicators, the communers, and I think we could get to places, especially in destitute countries, like third world countries in the USA. And Amanda, what do you, I mean, Patreon is it still exists like in a financial realm, but it is it's putting the gift of arts and human first, and then the money is kind of like the side note.
Well, yeah, the interesting thing about Patreon is that it's, in the same way that I think Kickstarter sort of opened up the entire world's brains to the idea that, you know, in a very short time, the world went from not understanding crowdfunding and, you know, the idea of using a technology, a platform like Kickstarter, to it being, you know, de rigueur for filmmakers, musicians, anyone who had, you know, needed a bunch of capital to make a project, going like, well, you know, there's now a way to get a bunch of capital. And I think Patreon might not have been able to exist without Kickstarter, because it's sort of like, step one, you could directly help an artist. You can give them $10 so that they have the capital to go start their business, make their project. Step two, you really can just believe in an artist and give them money and support, and I think enough of the shame had been kind of chipped away at, that people were like, well, you know, I guess instead of you bugging me every 18 months for capital to make a record, I could just agree to give you $5 a year. I mean, we're doing this anyway. I've supported 7 of your fucking Kickstarters, instead of us doing it this sloppy, lopsided way, because there are no musicians out there who only want to do a project once and then they're done. You know, pretty much most artists, most filmmakers, you know, they want to keep working. They need to find a sustainable way of making a living. The government isn't gonna fund it. Having one rich patron is a pain in the ass. But having 15,000 micro patrons who can come and go, you know, isn't a pain in the ass. You're not beholden to them necessarily.
It makes it sound so easy.
Well, I've been working on it for fucking 10 years. But you know, I think we're changing philosophically, psychologically, socioeconomically.
And most of it with the digital arrival of digital. I mean, none of this would have happened.
Right.
Of course, that is why there is phenomenal things.
That's exactly what I was about to say. Is now with blockchain, with microcurrency, alternative currencies, the abilities that the internet can give us, like my lips to like God's web, that it actually doesn't all collapse upon us. But there should be, you would think there would be, so much more connection and so much less waste.
Yeah.
Because we'll be able to connect and help so much more gracefully with so much more ease. You would think, you would hope.
And literally, other than, actually I started having semi-nightmares of the digital storage situation I keep hearing about. Even though, because I'm a definite, like, I love old buildings and weird-ass chairs, and I have them all over, but like imagining that we're all accumulating all this digital storage is freaky, but at the same time, I remember when iTunes and digital and music and film is catching up now, but music was the first to go as far as being an exchangeable thing. And that's why I always love music, is you can't hold it. You have to experience it live for it to be very magical, but the song, it's in the air, and you're not really, you know, it never made sense to me to have a dollar exchange for a song anyhow, which is why I just assumed I'd have to work in the arts and then like make music on the side. And the digital arrival of zero, so your career, meanwhile, has been while music lovers have recognized that there is no income going to a person making a song if there is a label. Like the label pretty much is hoarding the majority of the thing. And I remember so clearly, and one of the things I love about being of the generation that I am in music is that I got to witness the 90s into the 2000s, and just this like, what the first band I was in literally made like a $3 million record. Can you imagine how ridiculous that is? And made music videos for like $75,000. Like, and I was horrified. I was like a socialist Canadian accidentally in major rock band with that kind of crazy money. I was terrified. It's like, this is not gonna last. This is like very shameful. And you know, I still love like making music, but I was so excited to leave that world, but also watch it fall apart. I was like, this is, what's that?
And it didn't last.
No, it did not last. It was so...
That was the death rattle.
Absolutely. And I wrote it. I watched it go like the most expensive. And then at the moment of those record labels and Apple and this crazy iTunes thing, and I probably burned them, but I had contracts, like these record contracts. Wait a second, but these digital realities just happened. And you're telling me that you're going to take as much of the cut from the digital song than the one you paid to manufacture and distribute around the globe? No, there must be something, there must be a typo here.
And there's even something in that contract that includes breakage for digital items.
Which is like,
just in case
the CD thing broke and you like are paying for the damage of these things shipped around the globe. So I remember just like watching and laughing, and I hardly ever read the contracts that I was part of, but I was like, I just looked at that one line of, what? They're taking 75% of the free air digital version of my song? That has got to be wrong. And so that just kept breaking and breaking, and they had an opportunity to work with iTunes at the time. None of them did, because they're big, like, gluttonous, mega, owned by champagne companies and stuff, just these ridiculous, huge corporations who treated music like Coca-Cola. And then it just all, it's a disaster, but mainly people like us got out, and I have always been into the challenge makes for a creative solution, and you are the ultimate example of that. I just decided to move to Hudson and create an art factory and have people play here, and have affordable tickets. Like, that's another version of it. But watching the digital destruction of what needed to be destroyed, essentially, like that was a terrible system for exchanging art. And movies are gonna have the same, even though I'm totally committed to like you guys coming to see free movies, but people don't go to the movies much anymore either, and it's totally tragic because that is a modern ritual that was important for about 100 years, but it's happening the same way, and TV is like God, and streaming is cool, and no one
I think the pendulum swings back and forth. Like, I think people get tired of just watching Netflix in their house, and they come back together because people do want to share this communal experience. It's kind of like going to the chapel or something in this dark, sacred space. So the movie theater thing, it does, like, a lot of people are still doing it, surprisingly. The same way people are still buying books, weirdly, and nobody thought they would be. People still want real books.
Yeah, no, I
For
mean,
which
I think
they also don't pay you.
Oh, right, for which they don't pay you. And then now there's one of these weird, those fake books that people slide with their fingers. Does that get a bit bigger? Is that a higher paid royalty? I don't know, because I'm not in the big book business, but I assume not. Any other questions? Oh,
Oi.
oh yes.
The first thing that I have to say, I've spent a lot of time in this building, and I was thinking, I don't think I can recall any instance where there were 3 powerful women doing the panel.
Really? That's tragic.
In
2019,
no,
we're here.
it's fascinating to actually sit here and say, oh, there's not a man up there.
Actually, you're probably correct. I think there was one documentary film woman last year who spoke alone to Q&A. You're correct in that there rarely is not a man presenting a film here. I mean, there's like maybe women, but I mean, I guess I'm the one sometimes Q&A.
So bravo to them.
Okay, thank you.
Bravo.
So the thing, I mean, many different things brought me to this event. But the thing was that I just was unaware that Lewis Hyde wrote a book called The Gift. Because I was more familiar with the book he wrote called Trickster Makes the World. And that was a book he wrote maybe 15 years after he wrote The Gift. And that book is about a different archetype, particularly the boundary crossing artist that appears in different traditions. Basically, the shrewdness, the ingenuity, and the hunger. Like, it's quite frequently, he talks about Native American myths of the coyote who's hungry and steals food, and these are creation myths in many traditions. So in hearing about the gift economy, like, I imagine you have a lot to say about that, because I see you shaking your head about the motivation to make art quite frequently is hunger. So
there was a thing about the space, right? The void or something. There was what is that quote?
The gift moves towards the empty place.
Yeah.
Yeah, the gift of food moving towards the empty stomach is something that I've thought about in a bunch of different ways as somebody who makes art and somebody who doesn't always follow the rules. So I wonder if you have anything to say about that sort of thing.
Yeah, that was the first book I read by Lewis Hyde, and I had the same feeling. I was like, I want to make a film out of this book. But that one would be even harder to make a film out, because it wouldn't have to be animated, it's all these kind of myths and traditions. But I think there's definitely overlap between the two, like theft and gift is like two sides of the same coin, of this kind of subverting the rules of how things are supposed to work.
There was a moment in the film where there were all these children lying on these pieces of paper in the museum in Rome. And I even wrote down a note wasn't going to mention it, but it answers your question. I can barely read my own handwriting, but basically, I wrote down a note that you know, when I was a kid, the reason that I wanted to be an artist was not to make money. It wasn't to be celebrated or famous or anything like that. I wanted to be an artist because I wanted to feel like those kids in that scene. I wanted to be surrounded by laughing people, making things, connected. I looked at everyone in that scene and I went, oh my God, like they're literally connected. Everyone's connected, doing something together with, you know, an act of making that isn't, you know, that isn't just productive. I mean, I grew up in a very sort of very stoic New England household where like creativity was appreciated, but it wasn't productive. And we didn't, you know, I never felt moments like that in my household, and it's what I craved the most. And I was like, well, clearly, like, if I want to mainline that kind of fantasy, I should be an artist. That's what I want. That's what I want the world to feel like. And when you see artists who are motivated by money and ego, it just never feels as good. It never looks as good. It never tastes as good. You can sense it. And as I feel like as I've journeyed through the world of artists and makers, the ones who were motivated like that are always the most enjoyable to hang out with. You know?
Connectivity. I completely came to it through dreams of just being one with all humans. And there was a lot of that, any other questions?
Damien. Hey, use the mic.
So the movie discusses obviously gifting. We discussed previously like the shame and rejection of the gift, but from making the movie, what did you learn how to receive it? And it's the connection from sharing.
Yeah, I mean, when I finished this film, I realized that even though it's about these characters' stories that are very specific to these 4 places, like each of the stories is so personal to me too. And I didn't really realize it till later, but you know, like the girl making the bee was like, you know, people keep asking me like, why are you spending so much time on something that's only going to last for such a short time? And I'm asking myself, should I just cut my losses or? And then the guy who's hosting the potlatch was like, it's scary this part, you know, like, are people going to show up? Like, is the parking lot going to be filled to there? Or it's like, you know, it's not, that fear is not just like during the making of the film, but after too. It's like, okay, I made this gift, but is anybody going to receive it? Like, where's it going to go now that I've just spent 5 years making it, you know? So there's so much vulnerability and questions in the journey, and it's a crazy process. It's like I gave up all working for money to make this film, and it took so long to make, and I had to keep believing in it even when it felt totally crazy. And there was so many gifts of, you know, friends and community and family and people lending me their houses when I couldn't afford to pay rent and keep making this film and traveling. And, you know, it's like so many gifts are woven into the making of this film, and it's not an easy thing to be able to gracefully receive. And that was one of the most interesting things I found making the film and filming the people. You know, it's like, it's something that Lewis Hyde doesn't talk about in the book. It's more of an emotional thing, but it's like, it's hard to really receive well, you know? It's awkward because our whole culture has taught us to not do that. It's like, we're supposed to be independent, we're supposed to be able to support ourselves and do things on our own. So, yeah, it's an ongoing process of learning, but it's been a huge journey for me.
I think you kicked the shit out of that movie. It's so good. Just saying.
Any last questions before we dream of gifts of songs? Yes, back there. Oh, yes. multi-generational. But for me, one of the most effective moments of the film was following the tour guide through Metropolis, but then also the children. So do you think that this gift economy can be triggered in a certain generation, or it's something that should be triggered kind of amongst all of them?
Well, I mean, I think that's one of the most beautiful things in the book, The Gift, is this idea that like the spirit of an artist's gifts can wake our own, you know? So it's like art comes to us as a gift and shows us things that are inside us that we didn't realize and that are like excited and inspired and want to come out. So that's my question for those little girls, like growing up in this strange, kind of dark and edgy environment that's also so beautiful. It's like they're surrounded by these artists making work and they're so curious and open. So I haven't been back yet to Rome to show the film. I think I'm going to be there in the fall, and those two little girls will be 2 years older. Actually, I guess 3 years older than since we filmed it in 2016 now. So we'll see what they've become and we'll see what they absorb. But I think, you know, when we're little, we're so open and we absorb so much, and like some of the things that influence us the most and bring out our gifts are, you know, it's an important time.
I have an announcement, which is I brought a box of my own book, and I am going to stand at the door, and you can pay what you want for my probably $20 paperback.
It's a great book, I just reread it.
And it quotes Lewis Hyde extensively. You can pay me what you want, or I can give you my address and you can send me some tea or something like that. You can send me some Hudson Valley shrub to put in my cocktails. I'll trade.
Thank you, Robin and Amanda. Thank you to you guys being open, generous, and excited. Thank you for having us.